Are you starting out in watercolor and just not getting the results that you want? It's probably because you're making the same mistake that 90% of beginning watercolor artists make. And I know this because I made the same mistake when I started in watercolor. Now I paint watercolors that people buy and win competitions. In this video, I'm going to give you a shopping list that you can use to buy the right materials that will set you up for watercolor success. Most beginning watercolor artists buy cheap materials, and it kind of makes sense because they don't know if they want to continue with watercolor. But the problem is that it sets you up for failure. Cheap materials work against you in watercolor. For example, cheap paper doesn't absorb the pigment well, and so that makes layering techniques difficult. Tiny brushes, which beginning watercolor artists tend to go for, leave the lines. You can see the lines in the finished work, which you don't necessarily want in watercolor. Now, there are some exceptions to that, but for the most part, that's not what you want. And then with cheap pigments, they can be grainy, which has happened to me, or they're dilute and light, and you can't get deep, dark values that help you get the contrast that you need in a good watercolor. So with good quality materials, you're not fighting the paper, you've got brushes that will perform, you've got pigments that you can go from very light to very dark, and now it's a matter of learning the basics of watercolor, which is understanding how to use the moisture in the paper, understanding how to load your brush, understanding how to mix your pigments, and go from very light values to dark values to get good contrast and a lot of luminosity in the watercolor. Now to the shopping list, where we want to keep to a budget of $100 or less. First item on the list is paint. And when we go shopping for paint, it's easy to become completely overwhelmed by all the choices out there. And in this video, I am not going to talk about pan paints. I use tube paints exclusively. If I want to talk about pan paints, that's going to be in another video. The first brand of paints I'm going to talk about is Van Gogh, and these are great for beginners. You can either buy them as a set, or you can buy individual tubes. I've chosen here the pigments that I think are essential for a beginner to get the widest range of colors and color mixing. It also is very economical to buy them that way. My students have been very happy with them. The next brand on my list is Sakura Koi. I learned about Sakura Koi many years ago when I was given them for my birthday from one of my brothers, and I really enjoyed them. They are a little dilute, so it's good that they come in 12 milliliter tubes. You can buy them as a set, but I think that it's more economical to use the pigments that I've chosen here. The third brand is called Core. Core is actually manufactured by Golden, and for any of you who are familiar with Golden paints, they're very, very good, very high quality. Now you might wonder why I've put a more expensive brand on the list, and the reason is because when you buy them as a set, if you add in one more tube, raw umber, you've got all the pigments you need, and these pigments will last a long, long time. I didn't include a green because you can mix green. The final brand on the list is Daniel Smith, and if you were to look at the tubes and tubes of paint that I have in my studio, you would see by and large they are Daniel Smith. Again, I have hand-picked the pigments to give you the widest range of colors. I've summarized the prices here, and if you see, there's not that much of a difference in price when you talk about the Van Gogh and the Sakura Koi versus the Core paints. So for just a few dollars more, you can, at the beginning, step up your quality of paint dramatically and have a very good experience with the pigments. Now that you know what kind of paint to buy, what kind of watercolor paper should you buy? And again, that will perform well and not break the bank. Before I get into talking about the specific brands of paper to consider, I wanted to talk about the different kinds of paper that are made. In watercolor paper, there are different kinds of grains. There's cold press, hot press, and rough. Here is an example of cold press. I'm trying to hold this so you can see there is a little bit of a grain, trying to create a shadow where there are like hills and valleys in it. And so the hill, the top of the hill is something that you can utilize in, say, a dry brush technique. And if you want to know more about dry brush, I do have a video that talks about dry brush, which I have a link in the video above. The next one is hot press, and it's very, very smooth. So you shouldn't really see any grain at all. I mean, I should really be struggling. It's almost perfectly smooth, and you're probably not seeing, like, what am I supposed to be looking at? But yeah, it's very, very smooth and very, very hard to tell in this video that it's actually quite smooth. And then there's rough. So it should be really, really clear. You can really see how big the hills and valleys are. They're much deeper, say, dimples in the paper than you would find in cold press.
All right, let's go shopping.
I'm at Hobby Lobby to go shopping to help you find supplies you can afford. So here at Hobby Lobby, they do have racks of paper that you can buy and cut to size. And you can even find things like this at Michael's, or if you live in a bigger city, you can find some really good art shops that give you a lot of variety. Here are the brands of watercolor paper that you can find at Hobby Lobby. We have Arches, we have Bockingford, we have Canson, we have Strathmore. These are all good brands. You also will find you have different kinds of grain. We have cold press, we have hot press, and we have rough. These are full-size sheets of watercolor paper, 22 by 30 inches. They're 140 pounds, which is a good weight to start with. So what you can do if you buy any full sheets of paper, and I would recommend just one, they're $8.99 a piece, you can cut them to the sizes that you want. And that way you can figure out, do you really want to continue with watercolor? Especially if you use a good brand of watercolor paper, you're more likely to have success. I did want to point out that there is a 300-pound Arches paper available. It's $17.99 a sheet. The nice thing about 300 pound is that it really doesn't work, but you will pay a lot more money for it.
If you'd rather have a pad of paper, Arches makes a pad. Here's a 9 by 12 one that's a nice size, and you don't have to cut it yourself. It's ready to go. 12 sheets for $20. Not a super great value, but still, it's $20, which is not bad. If you don't have Strathmore at your local art store, you can always buy it from Dick Blick, and it's very inexpensive per sheet. You will pay for shipping. There is a minimum purchase amount in order to get free shipping from Dick Blick. I have quite a bit of this paper. I actually won it in a contest. It was like 30 sheets or something. It was a huge amount of paper. I still have it and have enjoyed using it. Here's a summary of prices for paper. At this point in our budget, we're just a little bit over half, which is pretty good for 2/3 of supplies. Next, we'll choose our brushes, but how do we do that from all the brushes out there?
While shopping at Hobby Lobby, you're going to see all of the brushes they sell, and it's going to be very tempting to buy something. However, I would urge you to think twice. I am going to cover information about brushes that are going to be cost effective and we will perform well for you. So if you have money to burn, feel free to experiment, but I would recommend not buying any of the brushes at Hobby Lobby.
The first brush I want to talk about is the Artigria brush set. If you don't buy any other brushes, buy these. I bought these as a risk for my students, not knowing if they would work well, so I tried them myself and I liked them, and the students all loved these brushes. Being quill brushes, they can hold a lot of water and work large areas, but then they come down to a very, very fine point, much finer than a round brush. So that's why I love them. The next brush is by Princeton in their Neptune line. I do not have a round brush in this line, but I do have their quills. The quills are on the expensive side, and I've replaced those with the Art Agria for this list. But I know the brand, I'm very familiar with their quill brushes, and I'm very confident that this is going to perform well for you and at a reasonable price. The Knit Pro brand of brushes was also an experiment when I was looking for inexpensive brushes for my students. So I bought them as well and tried them, and I've been very happy with them when it comes to detailed work. They have a nice spring to them and they don't flop around. So you can have a steady hand and the bristles don't move around and wiggle all over the paper. I really like them. The surprising brush in this list is not an expensive brush at all. It was kind of an accidental find from when I had a house painting project years ago. This is a chip brush from Lowe's, and I've tried them from Harbor Freight, but they're not as good. So get the one from Lowe's. What it is a natural bristle brush where the bristles have a lot of uneven sizes, and it can give you randomness in your brush strokes that can help out with skies and grasses. I've summarized the cost of the brushes here. Our subtotal at this point, if we go with just the Art Agria brushes, is $75. If we buy all the recommended brushes, we're up to $93. Let's move on to our palettes. Something that I have a lot of are different palettes. I love to look at different palettes, and there are quite a number here. It's really a matter of trying them out to see what you like. Here are two palettes I really like, and you can get them off of Amazon too. There's lots of different brands. So there's this one. It folds and then gives you lots of space for paints. This one is open and it gives you two mixing wells. You can buy those palettes either at a local art store like Hobby Lobby or on Amazon. All right, so have we blown our budget? Well, no, if we just have the Art Agria brush, we're well under $100. But if we get all recommended brushes, we're $2 shy of our budget. Now let's talk about some other goodies. Now here's a find. This is a bag of pipettes. These plastic pipettes can be really helpful when you're just trying to wet your paints, which is what I use them for. Another find. It's a color wheel. I had a color wheel for years, and I have really found that it can be helpful when you're trying to figure out how to mix colors. It comes with information on both sides, and this is the same color wheel I have. If you see it, pick it up. I recommend it. All right, how did we do? Well, if we buy all the brushes, we're going to blow our budget by $5. If you take out the other goodies, then you'll be at $98, but you really do have to have a palette of some kind. But if you only buy the Art Agria brushes, you can get everything for well under $100. So my goal with this video was to get you excited about watercolor because you have the knowledge to buy the correct materials to begin your watercolor journey with confidence. To see good watercolor materials in action, check out these two videos. Soon I'll post a new video where you can use your new watercolor supplies and get comfortable with watercolor from the get-go.